On behalf of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Opportunity, I welcome all of you to this forum on Black Lives and the Police. I am Dr. Haywood Brown, Vice President for Institutional Equity at the University of South Florida. Recent events in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd and others has reawakened our conscience as a society and prompts us all to ask, what can we do and what must we do to change the narrative that is played out so often in our communities with the tragic outcome of loss of life? So we've assembled a distinguished panel here today to speak to the Black lives and the police. And now I'd like to introduce our president, Dr. Steve Corral, president of the University of South Florida, for a few words of welcome. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I'm pleased to welcome everyone to this virtual conversation hosted by USF's Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Opportunity. I want to thank Dr. Brown and his team and our panelists and moderator for being here today. Your participation supports USF's efforts to inspire thoughtful dialogue across our campuses and the communities in our region on the topic of anti-racism, and in particular, perspectives regarding progressive policing. Events like this reflect USF's principles of community, which call for inclusion, civility, and respectful dialogue. These are principles that we developed in the first year of my presidency, and that couldn't be more relevant now. Instances of racism, discrimination, violence, and social injustice occurring across our country are beyond troubling. And the University of South Florida rejects these deplorable acts in the strongest possible terms. While we continue to reflect on the deeper issues that perpetrate societal racism, we must also take specific actions to be a greater force for positive change. Community conversations like this one are critical to our progress as they increase our understanding and help us make informed and thoughtful decisions to transform our communities and to help create a society where everyone can experience health and economic prosperity. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's moderator, Rod Carter. Rod is a broadcast journalist and anchor for News Channel 8. He's a proud graduate of Florida A&M University, a board member of the National Association of Black Journalists, and past president of the Tampa Bay Association of Black Journalists, as well as being active in many community organizations. Thank you, Rod, for leading this important conversation today.
Thank you so much, and welcome to all the panelists and everyone who's watching. It's a much needed conversation, and I hope that we have a great and open dialogue. So I'd like to begin by introducing some of the great folks that are going to be able to be in on this conversation that is of local importance and national importance as well. So I'll start with Michaela Burks, and I hope I said the name right, correct, Michaela? And Michaela is the Black Student Union Political Actions Chair, a third-year student majoring in psychology and minoring in women and gender studies. And she uses her leadership position to educate her peers and prompt conversations, important conversations on issues and news that affects the Black community. She is hoping to become a psychologist to help erase negative stigmas surrounding mental health, especially in the Black community. Michaela, thank you so much for being here. See, I caught myself. Our next panelist is Travis Coy, an attorney. In fact, he's an assistant state attorney with the Office of the State Attorney in the 13th Judicial Circuit and is the Juvenile Division Chief. Congratulations on a recent promotion, I understand. Travis graduated from Florida State University with honors in communication studies and a minor in sociology, and he received his law degree from Stetson University College of Law. Welcome, and thank you for being a part of this conversation as well. And next, USF Police Chief Chris Daniel He's worked for the USF Police Department, in fact, for 30 years and has served in just about every single role you could think of in the department, from a street officer to a public information officer, a corporal, a lieutenant, and the assistant chief. His goals include reducing crime and fear and crime on the university's campus, in the community of the university, and of course, bridging community gaps by encouraging all university police officers to positively interact with community. And Chief Daniel, thank you so much for being here as well. Our next panelist, Emanuel Harvey, is the Black Student Union president at the University of South Florida. Thank you so much for being here, sir. Appreciate it. He studied communications and sociology with a focus on inequality, social justice, and Black liberation. He's been a witness to police violence and legalized oppression, and uses his positions of leadership at the university to advocate for the Black community on and off the campus, really. Emanuel is currently researching how marginalized identity formation impacts young adults. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to be with us today. Our next panelist, St. Petersburg Police Chief Anthony Holloway. Chief Holloway began his law enforcement career with the Clearwater Police Department, actually in 1985. He was selected as the chief of police in Massachusetts in 2007, and then he rejoined the Clearwater Police Department as the police chief there in 2010. And then went on to become the chief of police for St. Petersburg's Police Department in 2014. Chief, thank you for being here as well. Our next panelist, Nick Miralda, and I hope I said your name right, Nick. I know I got the Nick part right, maybe Miralda, maybe not so much. Was recently elected to serve another 4-year term as president of the West Coast Florida Police Benevolent Association. He's the current sergeant at arms for the Florida PBA, and he retired from the Lakeland Police Department actually after 29 years of service. 21 of those years, he served as a member of the Tampa Drug Enforcement Administration as a federal narcotic task force agent. He represents now more than 700 law enforcement and correctional officers in West Central and Central Florida. Thank you so much for being here. Our next panelist is attorney Daryl Parks, whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for about 30 years, I think, Daryl. We went to school together. Daryl is an accomplished attorney and businessman who received an undergraduate degree from Florida A&M University and a law degree from Florida State University. His motto is advocate for the least of these. It's embodied in his zealous advocacy and his activism in civil rights. He's a managing partner at Parks Law LLC, which is a law firm with a national reputation. He has represented families of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and Corey Jones. And the reputation gained by attorney Parks and his firm has led to the appearances as a legal expert on national television broadcasts such as MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. So welcome, Daryl Parks, Attorney Parks. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Dr. David Pottson III. And he's an assistant professor in the University of South Florida School of Interdisciplinary Global Studies. He's a historian who focuses on the mutually reinforcing structure of residential segregation and racialized criminalization, police violence, and gendered violence. And he teaches courses in history, critical theory, and contemporary racial issues. Thank you all again for taking part in this great panel discussion, and we hope to have a really open, honest dialogue about the things that have come to the surface once again in our country and right here in our community. So I'm going to begin my questions actually with USF Police Chief Daniel. Talk for a moment about the type of diversity training your officers are required to undergo, and including how frequent that training needs to be.
Well, the training that law enforcement officers throughout the state of Florida go through is dictated primarily by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and the Criminal Justice Standards Training Commission. They establish various trainings throughout the calendar. Some are 4 years apart, some are 2 or 3 years apart, depending on the type of training. In this case, annually, we're expected to do use of force that includes de-escalation. We have managed at USF to include de-escalation in every type of use of force training, from firearms down to use of taser, into just mere officer presence, to ensure that officers know how to disengage and bring a situation back down to a manageable level, depending on how the other party is behaving. But there are some trainings that are biannually. Those are the less lethal weapon trainings. Every 3 years, the officers have to go through autism or post-traumatic stress disorder training. And then every 4 years, bias-based policing, juvenile sex offender training, and domestic violence. That just gives you a cross sampling of what some of the trainings the officers have to go through. the leadership in the agency can add to that training component if they'd like to. In our case, especially since the recent incidents, we are just working with our training corps to increase the diversity training, the bias-based policing from every 4 years to annually. In fact, I'm the chair of the State University System Chiefs Committee, which is a subset of the Florida Police Chiefs Association. So I represent all the chiefs from across the SUS at meetings and so forth. And I have weekly calls with those chiefs, and we are actually discussing trying to establish minimum standards and include diversity training annually across the system instead of just within USF itself. So we're trying to standardize things. We're trying to make them create some uniformity across the system, ensure that we have diversity woven into every bit of our operation and our activities. But again, on top of the diversity trainings that we experience, I also have 73% of my officers have been what we critical incident training, which helps dealing with mental health and other social issues to, again, learn how to disengage or de-escalate a situation as it builds out. We hope to carry those things to a greater state level by getting the other chiefs of police engaged. And because of the relationships those chiefs have in their geographic regions, we hope that to take that and each SUS region or district, as you would call them, get those local chiefs involved as well. And with that, we start to get this more comprehensive approach throughout the state. And I know other chiefs and sheriffs are doing the same thing in their own regions. So I think as long as we have a collective force working on these types of things, we have nowhere to go but improve.
You know, I think it would be important too to point out to people watching this that the training that you all go through as a university police force is the same training that other police forces who are not associated with a college campus go through, correct?
Yes, sir. That's absolutely correct. We go through an academy. We have, in fact, we compete with one another for viable candidates, and it becomes challenging. The one thing I would say, we police the same but differently. And I say that in that we still enforce state laws, and we do the same things that a municipal or a county or state agency would do. The difference I find on campus is that we're much more embedded in the community policing practices, is that by nature, our environments create this interactive piece with our community. My officers are embedded in all types of committees and groups throughout campus. We work to solve problems that aren't necessarily police problems either. We help these students get to the counseling center if they need it, or to student health if they need it. It's not just going out and trying to identify lawbreakers. We're problem solvers, and that's what I think is the unique piece about university policing is we look for a special person that comes in and they want to solve problems. They just don't want to run and chase people through neighborhoods and so forth. So that's why I think this type of policing is very endearing to certain personalities, and we have to find the right fit.
Chief, I have a question about record keeping, that sort of thing. I'm going to come back to you because I want Chief Holloway to kind of weigh in for a minute on what we're seeing across the country right now with this widespread coverage of race-related incidents in Minneapolis, Atlanta, Louisville, and right here in our own city. Tell me a little bit, Chief Holloway, just about kind of how things are different that you've seen here over the course of the last couple of months.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation, because this conversation needs to be had. But I'm also saying after this conversation, we need to make sure we have some action steps to continue to move forward. What I've seen here in the Tampa Bay area is that all the police chiefs and all the sheriffs are reviewing their policies to make sure that they have the right policies that are in place to ensure that the people in the community are safe. When the 8-weight came out, I think every agency here in the Tampa Bay area, I think 90% of them were in compliance with that. So we're looking to see what's going on out there. And if there's a policy that needs to be changed, I'll speak for myself. in Pinellas County, we are changing those policies to make sure that we are protecting people in the community.
Talk for a moment about things like the knee on the neck, shooting a fleeing suspect, how that would differ in your department. How would you respond to a similar circumstance? How would your officers respond to that?
So I've been in law enforcement for 35 years, been a police chief for 13 years, and all the agencies I've been involved in, number one, there is no policy in that. There's no chokehold. There's no putting a knee on someone's neck. So that would be out no matter where I was. So I can tell you from St. Pete to Somerville, Massachusetts, those things are not in place. Shooting at fleeing felons, that's not in place also. And a lot of agencies do have that in place. Right now, I chair the Florida Police Chief Accountability and Societal Change. And we're making sure that throughout the state of Florida, that is always going to be addressed the same way, whether you're down in Key West, the Panhandles, Orlando, Miami, that you're going to see the same policies or recommendations. So those agencies are following those standards.
Nick Miralda, I want to bring you into the conversation. What is a normal protocol when officers engage in actions that are alleged to be excessive use of force for the Police Benevolent Association? What's the protocol for you guys when that happens?
All protocols are basically the same. I represent a multitude of agencies in the West Central Florida area, but pretty much anybody can file a complaint, even before all of these past incidents occurred. The person who was, obviously the victim of the excessive force can, a witness, a family member. We've recently had where they tagged it with a video on Facebook and sent it to the department and said, hey, are you aware of this? Take a look at this. The agency looked at it and said, we need to look into something like this. And they initiated their own investigation on it. So it comes in in a myriad of ways now. Anonymous complaints, they'll take any complaint, vet it out. They're encouraged, the victim is encouraged to write the complaint out in their own words, but we will help out. If there's a language barrier, or if there's somebody who speaks Spanish or a different language, we'll find somebody. We will make it to where the complaint can get written. The protocol is basically like, we'll take any and all complaints, they'll vet them and put it through the proper protocol, whether it be through an internal affairs investigation, operational standards, take your pick. And then ultimately, if it goes into a criminal realm, then it goes down a different avenue and it goes to the state attorney's review and criminal and so forth.
So I think what we saw in Minneapolis after the George Floyd situation was there was a rallying cry from a lot of people who said these officers need to be arrested and they need to be arrested immediately. At what point does your protocol deviate when something like that happens and there's this groundswell of asking for these officers to be disciplined and arrested? Does it change the way your protocols happen?
We use one standard, and it's due process. We pump the brakes, we slow down. If it's such an egregious offense, place the officer on paid leave and let it breathe, because what we ask for is a multitude. You want to see all the evidence that comes out, not just one video angle. You don't want to jump to conclusions and look at just one angle and say, oh, that officer is definitely guilty. And then 3 or 4 days later, find out there were multiple angles showing a totally different scenario of what happened. So in our aspect, it's straight up due process. We want the officer to be either placed on leave or given the opportunity to at least see all the evidence. And then he has the due process rights to go through. No need to jump immediately to a termination or a separation right away. I think it's the facts are the facts, but allow everything play itself out and to give both the victim and the officer straight up due process. And due process goes hands in hands with our Police Officer Bill of Rights, which we hold sacred. It's 112.532. And we have a certain set because of years and years of abuse by management on police officers. The legislators came out with 112.532, which is our Police Officer Bill of Rights. So we go hand in hand with due process. And we want the officer to have the same rights as anybody else. Just let it play itself out.
Does it make it difficult to do that when there's so much, groundswell from people saying something needs to be done and needs to be done right now?
Absolutely. It's the most difficult part. I mean, you try to tell everybody they want it, instant gratification where fire them immediately. And our position is, and that could be the case. It could be so egregious that ultimately that officer should and would be terminated. But give us the opportunity, give him the opportunity or her to review all the facts of the case, and then we can make a more educated stance and position on what happens. But yes, that's the most difficult part now, is jumping the gun and saying, oh, going right to termination, and then coming back and saying, well, we've got to now represent this officer and file a grievance because his due process rights were violated, when we know that the action and what he did was completely inappropriate. That's tough. That's the toughest one. Yeah.
Let's bring Attorney Parks into it. Attorney Daryl Parks, from your perspective, as someone who's represented clients who sued police for excessive force, what are the elements that you have to have in hand to prove a lawsuit of excessive force by police?
Well, Rod, I think that this whole conversation that we're having nationally now, probably the most important thing from a practitioner standpoint is the body cam, dash cam conversation. And it's sort of gotten lost in the conversation that we've had as a country, in that we haven't, and I agree clearly with the previous speaker, that it's not an issue of people being shot as they're fleeing or chokeholds. That's not what we see as practitioners. That's not the issue. And you sort of hate that the discussion went to one or two cases where those were the only issues that were at the forefront, made the news, that people now want to talk about them like they're the key issue. It's not. The bigger issue, and I think more going to the accountability side of it, is simply that as a country that we move toward nationalization of body cams and dash cam, and requiring that officers keep them on, and that if they turn them off, that there'll be implications for doing so. That's where I hope the conversation ends ultimately. Well, we may or may not get there, but I can tell you that that should be the goal, because one thing that we know, that when all the evidence is fair and we all get a chance to look at it, then all can be held accountable. So that's my hope and my prayer for this conversation. But I do think, because the crying baby always gets the milk, we may or may not get back to this issue, because it's not the number one and number two issue that we're talking about today as a country.
What actions or changes to policing do you think would help to decrease excessive force and excessive force or use by police against people of color? Would it be body cams? Is that the number one thing? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think without question, body cam and dash cam is it, because once a situation happens, the story gets told, and the story is told better if there is very independent evidence versus some report that was written by an officer after the fact of his memory of the situation. I think body cam and dash cam goes to the heart of that. But also, too, since we're on a university campus talking about this issue, you have to get to a point where officers really do know the communities that they're policing. Sometimes, like, I live in Tallahassee, I actually had a conversation with my chief the other day, and it was suggested to him that I don't see our officers out of the cars like you see on university campuses. So I love what Chief Daniel said about how his officers get out the car, they know the students, they know the community. Well, some of our departments get overwhelmed, and the officers don't get a chance to get to know the community. There's a lot to be said about when an officer gets out of his car to investigate something. If there are people that recognize and know that officer, and say, "Hey, it's Officer Rod Carter. Hey, Officer Carter, how you doing?" Oh, the dialogue is already set. Versus if it's a complete stranger who comes and maybe is taking an approach of, "Oh, I want to take somebody to jail." Well, that's not how, I think I love what the other thing that Chief Daniel said about we're in the dispute business. We deal with situations. That's what we're looking for. And I think that the new conversation that we're getting ready to have about safety is not a defund the police situation, safety issues. For example, you're aware that I had a niece that had a psychiatric situation in Hillsborough County, right? And we have to have law enforcement agencies that know how to deal with that, right? Because we're recognizing now that almost 25% of the police shootings that may happen involve people who are going through a psychiatric situation. And so a lot of our officers aren't equipped to deal with that. That's a different phenomenon. That requires a person of a different training or a better training to deal with. So as we start having these conversations about what does policing look like going forward, yes, we need that person who goes in and knocks down the bad guy. There's a place for that person. Okay, we like that person. But there's also a place for a person that deals with our sister who may be going through a serious psychiatric situation, who may present a physical threat who also is suffering mentally. How do we deal with that? That person I represent to you probably shouldn't be shot because they have a knife in their hand, which is the current response that we have.
I'm going to key in on something you said about community policing and knowing the officer. Chief Holloway, you all had a program just this weekend where you invited some young people to come up and talk to police officers, see what a squad car looks like, and have conversations. They were really young, and one of the people who was there said they think maybe it even needs to start younger than that group, maybe with toddlers. Is that really the key to making a difference in how some of these situations turn out?
It does. And add on at our police department, you covered the story. We have a program called Park, Walk, and Talk. Every officer for 1 hour a week, he or she has to get out of their car, not make an arrest, and meet people in the community in the zone they work. And now we're up to 2 to 3 hours a week, because you know what? If you know someone, you can't hurt that person. If you know that person, you can deal with that person. And we should start young. And I said before, law enforcement, I'm tired of parents coming up to us and saying, if you do something wrong, he or she is going to take you to jail. You already put that negative idea in that child's head. So let's sit down and let's have that tough not a tough conversation. Let's have a conversation so we can start building those bridges again.
Thank you, Chief. Attorney Travis Coy, Assistant State Attorney. Your thought process and how a decision is made when it comes to charging someone or not charging someone, an officer, in a violent crime.
Sure. Thanks, Rod. When it comes to a situation, whether or not a charge is going to be filed or not, it really hinges on whether or not there's actual probable cause. And simply put, probable cause is whether or not there's objective proof that a person actually committed a crime. And that proof comes in the form of evidence. And there's different types of evidence. Specifically, there's two categories of evidence. One being direct, also referred to as real evidence. And examples of those are your classic, an eyewitness. Somebody saw or they heard something. The other one, is video surveillance. It actually captures the incident. And then there's actually circumstantial. And the name actually implies, based upon the circumstances, you can detect whether or not the person actually committed the crime. So in a situation like that would be like fingerprints left at a scene. So when it comes to whether or not to file, again, it hinges on whether or not there's probable cause.
Mr. Park said more cameras. Attorney Park said more cameras will make a big difference. Mr. Miralda said that sometimes you need to see all the cameras. Maybe you can't base it on just one viewpoint. So it all comes right back to the state attorney's office. And how do you weigh those two things?
Well, I completely agree. I mean, it's hard to argue against video, right? I mean, video captures basically well, at least we hope the whole entire incident. But something like that with video, again, it's hard to rebut it, and it helps out substantially, because I think we all know people have different perspective of how things occur. Well, a video isn't biased. You just press play and that's it. It shows what it actually recorded.
I'm going to turn the conversation just a hair, though. I'm coming back to you. When you have 15, I see you over there waving. When you have about 15 social media videos and then a dash cam video, how much does it relate to the other? Or do
they really don't? It's all about the totality of the circumstances. I mean, we would take actual account of what statements that witnesses have provided, but we also look to see what footage, if there is any, that takes to see whether or not they corroborate or whether or not they also discredit a person or persons. So it's a complete global picture of actually what took place, not just a snippet of one particular video or another, but it's a whole complete picture.
Gotcha. All right, Nick. I see you chomping at the bit over there. Go ahead.
I don't want to rain on the video. I understand the video cameras, but I want to explain. They're not the end all be all, right? Okay. The camera does not factor in my experience, what I'm seeing, what I'm smelling, how my blood pressure is. If I'm walking down into a house where I've done hundreds of search warrants and I turn my head and my camera's going facing forward and I turn my head and I see a guy with a gun and I shoot that person, it's not on video, okay? they're going to say, why did you shoot that guy? I said, because I heard something and I turned my head. I didn't turn my whole body camera. Does not factor in everything. I can tell you that we've reviewed tons of videos where the officer said, that's not how I perceive it. That video shows you something, but it doesn't perceive. Now it's running the whole time, but it doesn't perceive. I've been on this block before. I know this individual. I know this individual that he likes to carry a firearm. I keyed on that, and I saw that bulge, right? And I had all these factors going into it. You can't plug all those things into the video and have it come out that way. All you do is show the video, and it shows one aspect of it. But there's so many other factors to it that's why I like to get involved with it. If you can come up with a video that can factor all that stuff in. Good luck with that. The officers, yeah.
Would that same body cam video or dash cam video help clear an officer?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I mean, listen, we've had a lot of instances where people come in and complain, and we showed them the video and said, and they walk out and said, have a nice day, you're right, okay? And that happens, but what I'm talking about is in a complex situation of a shooting or a gunfight where there's multiple angles or multiple things, not just a straight up traffic stop where somebody's complaining. I'm talking about when I'm going into a house, and like I said, they're putting cameras on glasses now, which is great. So now when I turn, I can catch everything. But most of the guys are having them straight in their chest, and that's capturing everything in one way. I'm looking, and I mean, my threats are to my left, to my right. I'm looking all around. So they're not the end all. They're not the end all be all. They're not the great. You know, they're part. But we've got to realize there's a lot of different factors, even with the videos. They're not going to be like, hey, this is going to save the day. That's all.
All right. I'm going to bring David Pottson into the conversation. David, what has historical scholarship, I should say, revealed about the relationship between Black people and the institution of law enforcement in the course of U.S. history? I feel like you're about to give us the best class ever.
Let's see. So I do want to emphasize at the outset that when I think about historical research on policing and race, I'm thinking about it at an institutional level. So local police departments, university police departments might have policies that differentiate them in some kinds of way, but the institution of policing is really what's at question here. So it's often said, people understand this point, I think, that the lineage of modern policing in the United States is within slave patrols. Their job was to make sure that enslaved people did not have free reign over space. That legacy continued into the mid-1800s when police departments modernized a bit more. And their job in the Northeast was to make sure that working class people maintained order, right? You had industrialization, you had child labor practices, you had all sorts of strikes and sometimes riots against exploitative employers. And the job of police officers was to make sure that those workers were contained. And so one of the things that historians agree on, this is not really a tendentious matter, is that the job of police officers in society is to maintain order. The problem is, if the order in that society is one of economic exploitation, then police officers have to abet people who are the elite, who are exploiting other people. If the order of your society is racist, then the job of police officers becomes maintaining a society that privileges one racial group over another racial group. So historians agree about that. We have a lot of evidence to support it. We have examples right here in the state of Florida. H. Leslie Quigg, popular Miami Police Department chief in the 1920s, was an open member of the KKK. He made it clear that the job of his organization was to maintain the privileges of white people, publicly beat a Black bellboy for speaking to a white woman. We have other examples in Florida. The Great Hurricane of 1926 devastated Miami, but it spared Colored Town in part because of residential segregation. So wealthy white people lived on the coast and their homes were destroyed. Their communities were devastated. What happened? Law enforcement was conscripted to go grab Black people from Colored Town to rebuild white Miami. And when they tried to defend their women against being conscripted, they were arrested, right, after a gun battle. So maintaining order in a society that is racist means that you become abettors to racism. Historians also agree that crime isn't a mind-independent fact. Crime is a political and social construction. So what gets counted as a crime in a society and who gets targeted for law enforcement isn't really a matter of objective data. It becomes a matter of subjectivity. So we know, for example, lynching is still not a federal crime. It should be, but it's not. And so that's a material fact. We know that some laws have been written that have been race specific. After the Civil War and during Reconstruction, Mississippi passed a law that specifically said Black people had to have employment, otherwise they would be vagrants and could be arrested. And if they could be arrested, then they could be sent out to work as convict laborers, which is essentially slavery. After the Civil War, we have racially biased laws that still affect people today, with the disparities between what it means to carry a certain amount of cocaine that is powder versus crack cocaine. And we know that that came out of a racially biased targeting of Black communities and poor people. So that's another issue that we have to address. When we talk about what is crime and who's committing it and who are we keeping safe, we have to understand that crime isn't an objective fact. Another thing that historians agree on is that racially biased law enforcement produces racially biased statistics that are taken as raw objective data. So the Nixon administration, for example, and their billions of dollars of funding for the LEAA decided that they were going to build prisons based on the projected birth rate of young Black boys, not the prevalence of crime in urban centers, because crime was actually falling, not the number of Black boys who actually existed at the time, but their ideas about the birth rate, because they anticipated that they were going to be arresting and warehousing these young people. Sociologists are doing studies today that reveal even now that when Black people say things like Black Lives Matter or when they protest against police brutality, what they really are hearing is an attack on white people.
And I was going to ask you about that. So Black Lives Matter is often treated by some as divisive. And, you know, those who are proponents of Black Lives Matter clearly say that we just want Black lives to matter. Well, like, where does that change? How do you change the perception of what that means?
There's a lot of work that needs to be done. My initial thought on the question is that we have to have a real conversation about race. And by have a real conversation about race, I don't mean to just simply have a dialogue, but actually to encounter what race means. So when I hear Black Lives Matter, I hear three different kinds of articulations or utterances. One of them is an affirmation towards Black people. And it's Black people saying to other Black people, life is hard in this country. I affirm that you matter. The second articulation that I hear is a declaration to the body politic. It's a statement to the nation. You're either with us or you're against us because this is a political matter, which is what I'm going to get back to when I talk about race. And then the third thing is an appeal, or at least an interrogation. If the nation has this ideal that we do all matter, that the duty of the state is to protect our lives and to ensure domestic tranquility and the pursuit of happiness, then how can we collectively turn a blind eye to Black suffering? So if those are the three things that Black people are saying when they say Black Lives Matter, your question is, what's the chasm where other people interpret it as no other lives matter or Black Lives Matter more? And I think that's because we fundamentally misapprehend what race is. So people think Black as a property that people own, as a characteristic or a trait as a skin color. People still, whether they say it or not, think of race as biological. They think of it as genetic and they think of it as cultural. But it's none of those things. Race is a political construction. We know this is true because in the Dred Scott decision, Justice Taney made it clear, Black people have no rights which a white man is bound to respect. It's written in the Constitution, enslaved white people were not counted as people, they were counted as chattel. We see it in the state-sanctioned murders of people like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd today. Who counts as human in this society is a philosophical and political question, and race is just shorthand for what I just said. Do you count as fully human or do you not? And if you don't think that Black people count as fully human, then when you hear Black Lives Matter, what you hear is an attack against white people. What you hear is Black people making a claim to a status that they were not supposed to be allowed in the first place. And so that is perpetuated by segregation in schools and in residential locations. When I hear things like police officers have to get to know the communities they serve, well, if they lived in those communities, there wouldn't be a getting to know process. Right? There's preferential employment practices that benefit white people, preferential treatment in the criminal legal system, inheritances of wealth that are rooted either in slavery or Jim Crow. Those kinds of things are not political privileges that white America wants to give up. And when you say Black Lives Matter, what you're saying is, I dare you to give up those privileges so that we can attain the nation's ideals.
I'm going to move the conversation to Emanuel. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Emanuel, what social and political actions do you think students can take to assist in bringing about positive societal change when it comes to police and excessive force against Black people?
Well, when we talk about what are the social and political moves that students can take in, I'm sorry, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel. I forgot to say thank y'all. But also when we talk about what students can do to prevent excessive use against the police, or when we talk about what students can do to advocate for that, we also have to understand that students also don't have the ability to step into police unions, into district attorney headquarters. Like, they don't have the authority to make those decisions, which is why often students turn to protest and students turn to information and recording and things like that. So when we talk about what students should be doing, what me as a BSU president, I would say we shouldn't be using a police force that has exercised excessive force. We shouldn't be using police force when we talk about domestic violence, mental health, community support, because it's clear, if it's clear that our police force, or the force that is supposed to be policing us or enforcing the law, if it's clear that they are doing so in a discriminatory manner, or if it's clear that they are not doing so equally, then we shouldn't be using that police in the first place. Which is why when we talk about defunding the police or abolishing police, it's not saying that we want anarchy or that we want no enforcement of law, but what we're saying is if it is clear that police, law enforcement, ICE, et cetera, cannot clearly and equally support the community and all the people who are in it, then why would we use that police force to begin with? So when, for example, USF students, we use USFPD when we're on campus. I have been in conversations with USFPD, with student success and things like that about police reform, while at the same time, USFPD is dealing with an investigation where an officer has been openly racist. So we're kind of talking about, well, let's police reform, while at the same time, how can we reform the police when they're going on paid leave, and when we want things to cool over before we really start investigating things? It's kind of like, at this point, who matters most? So I think that's the question that's my question to your question.
I got you. That makes sense. Are there specific things that the BSU is doing to try to help affect that change? You alluded to a couple of them, I think.
Yes, so the Black Student Union at USF's Tampa campus, we have released a list of demands with 10 demands for our university, because as much as there needs to be reform for police to support Black lives and the Black Lives Matter movement, we also have to understand that higher education also operates under racism, because Black students, Black people, and other people of color haven't had the same timeline or the same access to education that other people have. So we are kind of trying to speed ahead. And when we look at things like, for example, how Ebonics isn't treated as a language or treated as an academic language, or when we talk about how financial aid this can be discriminatory, when we talk about how we have advisors, faculty, staff, who don't have to have anti-bias training, that means we're allowing bias into our educational institution. So that's why the BSU has released our list of demands, which includes police reform, includes additional funding for Black student organizations, Africana studies, the creation of a department dedicated toward Black student success, and other tangible actions that show that USF actually does support Black people. So that is what BSU has been doing so far. If you would like to check out our list of demands, it is on our Instagram. I'd also be happy to send it out to each of you.
Okay, thank you so much. Michaela, does police violence and media coverage of these kinds of incidents, police violence against Black people, how does that affect your generation?
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me that question. I think that there are three major things happening with all the police violence and the media that we see, like the media we consume. I feel like for our generation, it's been enlightening. It's also been disheartening, and it's been causing a great divide between us. It's been enlightening because we're beginning to question, okay, why is this happening? What's the
Michaela,
real
let me
issue?
stop you. I think your camera's off. You want to pop that camera on for us?
Sorry.
That's okay. You
Is
just want
it on now?
No, it's still not on. But
I see her. I see her.
I can see her.
Are we serious?
Okay, then it
You-
was my bad
okay.
computer. Sorry, Michaela, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. But yeah, like I was saying, I feel like it's been enlightening for us because we're questioning why these things are happening in our communities. We're questioning why there are disproportionate, killings of Black people by the police, and we're understanding that a lot of times when our communities are being targeted, it's crimes of poverty, honestly, and it's not issues that affect my communities. And so we're understanding just in the foundation of the policing system in the United States, we're understanding how it's related to, of course, slavery, how it's related to systematic racism, and it's causing us to start prompting change, to think about initiatives to change how our society is now and how Black people are being treated by the police. And I also feel that for a lot of members of our generation, we're beginning to lose hope, honestly, because it's something that's been going on for so long, and it's taken so much for conversations to arrive. And we're like, wow, how much longer are we going to have to wait for there to be change? And also, like, just considering the COVID protests that were going on across the nation, these were white protesters acting in ways that are completely just unthinkable. Like, they have guns, they're marching down the streets, they're yelling in the face of police officers, and they're facing little to no repercussions. But when Black people protest for our lives, we're being murdered, we're being arrested, we're being tear gassed, and it's disheartening. And also, like I said, the third thing, I believe it's causing a divide between our generation, because there are people who see it from different ways. There are non-Black members of our generation who don't see how it's affecting Black people and young Black people. And so I think that the way we form our relationships between each other, just in our generation, it's changing because it's come down to whose side are you on? And are you willing to fight with us and for us? And so I think those are the three major changes that I've seen regarding police violence in the media.
So in my job covering a lot of these protests and that sort of thing, I've been somewhat critical of my own industry about how we cover these protests, because I think sometimes we get into what I call the protest traffic report. They're going left, they're going right, they're turning down this street, and not the reason behind that. So I went out one day and just with my cell phone and just asked some of those young people who were out there, why are you here? To hear just their thoughts about what they were hoping to accomplish. So my question to you, Michaela, is do you think these protests have been effective? Have they accomplished what, a lot of the folks who were out there were hoping that they would accomplish?
I think the protests have definitely had a huge impact in different systems that are in our country. I feel like the 8 Can't Wait campaign is a good start. I feel like it's something that the protests have definitely pushed forward. And yeah, I feel like the protests have they've done a decent job at getting us started, but I still feel like there's much to be done. And I just hope that the momentum from the protests will continue to push us forward.
Chief Holloway, I want you to talk for a moment about the protests from your perspective, and from a police perspective, and what you saw happening on the streets.
Well, I saw a lot of people out there that had a message to give to law enforcement, and I can tell you a lot of police chiefs and sheriffs listen to those conversations, because that's the only way we're going to get better in what we're doing. But then you also had that small percent, those 1%ers that were out there that were looking to start issues that were losing the conversation. And I think that's what happened to TV. TV was more, or media was more ready to cover that part of it, the destruction, instead of covering the conversation. So I think that's where the shift came in. There were a lot of positive things that were done, like Ms. McKay was talking about, the 8 can't wait, talking about recruitment, talking about what we can, those conversations will need to be heard. That 1% of people destroying property, that didn't need to be heard because that wasn't really what the other 99% were out there protesting about.
How do we get beyond the conversation and get to action? That's one of the things, Chief, that you said right off the bat, that it's great to have these conversations, but there needs to be action. And I'm going to kind of just open this up to anyone. I'll start with you, Chief, and then others can jump in. What needs to be done to get beyond rhetoric and discussion and get to relevant action to make some sort of relevant change? Well,
I think Nick covered it the best way. There's about 30,000 police departments. They range from about 30,000 to for a 4-man police department. So you got to look at how you're going to get those standards across the nation. The things that happened to Mr. Floyd, I can tell you, it wouldn't happen down here because we have standards. We don't have the chokehold. All those things that happen, we don't have here in the state of Florida. There are a lot of things that have been put in place throughout different states. So I think that has to be standardized. I think groups like this need to sit down and go like, okay, let's sit down and let's draw a roadmap. Because we've talked about this, again, for 35 years, we've been talking about the same thing, and we moved probably maybe 2 feet. It's time for us, like I said, okay, when the protest goes away, we need to be sitting down at the table to make sure that we keep addressing these issues. Make sure police department look at their policies and procedures, because they do that, they change it, but then some small agencies don't, and then that's what you end up seeing on television.
Chief Holloway, playing devil's advocate, people will say maybe George Floyd wouldn't happen here, but that there has been instances of police brutality against people of color throughout the Tampa Bay area. There's been a rallying cry about how do you answer those kinds of comments? And because people will say that it may not be to the point where someone will put a knee on the neck. There has been that kind of death and violence that has happened.
And it comes down to you got to act. Not only police officers, but the community. If you see something, say something, report it. Just like Nick was saying, call it in, send a videotape. I've actually taken complaints where someone just sent the officer a videotape. I become the complainant. You got to point it out. In every profession, there are people that we don't want. And it takes a group like this to help us identify those officers that I don't want working for me. I don't want working anywhere else. But it's going to take a group of us to do that, to respond to that. You're right. Could that happen in St. Pete? I wouldn't say maybe the chokehold shouldn't happen in St. Pete, but maybe some officer, he or she may use excessive force. And we want to address that, and we don't want them working for us.
Chief Daniel, what does it take for a person to become a police officer? I mean, we can talk mental fitness, what kind of test, physical fitness, what do they go through at the academy?
It's the academy is very academic, a lot of coursework, learning the laws, learning ethics and so forth, but there are some physical components to it. I think Chief Holloway would agree, it depends upon the agency, but they go through a polygraph, a background investigation, a thorough background investigation, to the point that we visit their home, we talk to neighbors. We don't just take, anybody applying for a job is going to put down people that are as references who are going to give them good references. Otherwise, why use them? So we go out and we kind of build the Kodak commercial moment where we say, okay, who else can we talk to? And those people will refer us out. And sometimes we'll talk to somebody 2 or 3 tiers down to get the truth about this person, and things come out. So we look for somebody with good moral character. It's a difficult or challenging opportunity anymore to get a viable candidate pool, because people do have things in their background that come out and cause us to pause and have to consider, is this something that would preclude them from being a good fit in our community? So most of the time not, but there are times that we just have to say it's time to screen them out. But we do have, and before we do any hiring, I do a final interview of my own. I don't just take the word of the people in my department who have talked to this person and screen them. I want to talk to them, and I want to ask those pointed questions about the things that may come out in their background. So, like I said, a university environment, people have their most valuable assets here, and that would be their children. So I have a responsibility to make sure I hire people that fit uniquely in this community, that can be effective police officers, but also can help these kids transition from one stage of life to another.
Attorney Parks, when something like this happens and there's an incident of violence involving a police officer, how deep do you all, as an attorney, delve into that person's background when making these kinds of claims? Just do you do it to show a history of situations, or what do you do?
Well, you definitely want to do an initial investigation into this officer, starting with their personnel file, starting with others who may have been involved with the incident. Normally, it's not just one officer. So you investigate fully the situation. However, though, Rod, often is the case, information it doesn't flow freely when incidents happen. In our state, when a criminal investigation begins, normally the person who has this possible civil case is left out, and the cloud of we have an investigation going on is probably one of the big issues that people don't talk much about, because we do allow investigations to have the secrecy and protection at times. However, there comes a time when the public attention trumps that to some degree, in that the public has the right to know, the public demands to know. So that's normally the big fight, right? Because most of the time, the law enforcement agency and the state attorney's office, to a large degree, feels that they have the right to do their work under the protection of the law. Well, I tend to differ on that one a little bit, in that there comes a point, though, that the people's will challenges that, and that there may come a point where the public right to know is so strong that a different decision has to be made. So that's often the battle you'll see. Now, the cops don't like that as much, right? Because we can't hold law enforcement officers accountable, but we can hold mayors and governors and elected prosecutors and elected sheriffs very accountable. Because there comes a point where if they get the sentiment of the public wrong, then there's a high level of accountability that will come very soon. And so that becomes, and then I sometimes feel sorry for chiefs of police, right? Because they work for the elected person, right? They have to go to city commission meetings and county commission meetings and account, but also they're part of a police force too, that they want to be supportive of the troops. I get that, right? However, I think it comes to a point, though, that the troops and those with badges and those with authority have to always understand that whatever authorities they have, we gave to them. We gave to them. It's not theirs, right? It's us as a collective civil society. We empower you. We wrote a law. We gave you a badge. We put a budget together so that you would protect us. And so I think the one great thing, that since we're talking about students here, students must always take the mindset of, one, respecting it, but understand that this is an entity that we created. We voted for it, we hired these people, and we want them to do a good job, and we want to be there for them. But we want there to be a group of rules that they go by. So as we get in these cases, to answer your question, I went around a little bit, but when we get in these cases, you take it for what it is, right? I take the person I represent for who they are, right? Probably the biggest challenge, though, another big challenge, other than the investigation piece of it, is there's always a big move to discredit especially if it's a dead person, right? And that for whatever reason, their whole history has to be made public and to discredit them, and which may have nothing to do with the facts of the case. That's why independent facts like microphones, independent facts like cameras become very important, right? And as the gentleman from the PBA said earlier, the officer has his version in history, right? But that's where lawyers come in. That's where we have a role, because everybody gets a group of lawyers, and we're going to tell a story, right? And that story may be the officer has a history of this, but you know what? This defendant has a history of that. Those things may have no role in the facts. So that's why as much of the independent facts of that situation become very important. And so my hope and prayer, one thing I see, though, I pray that the people who go into law enforcement are courageous. That's one issue that I've seen out there, that we need to have folks who are not so quick on to pull a gun and to shoot the gun. They need to not be scared of the situations. They need to be able to manage situations in a courageous, brave way. And I've seen too many situations where that was not the case, where people may have been a little trigger happy for some other reasons. That's my experience. And I've buried a lot of people. I mean, I've seen a lot of death, too much death, to be honest with you, of our people, and trying to explain. I had a situation happen the other day, Ron, when I saw the prosecutor in Missouri decided not to prosecute that officer, right? I wish he had called me. I did an autopsy, of Michael Brown. I would have talked about it and gave him my perspective. I think I would have had the evidence that would have helped him, right? He didn't call me, right? And I don't know why he didn't call me. But that's neither here nor there. But when you're out here fighting, I've made part of my profession and my life fighting for the lives of people who often are discounted. And so that's something I take very serious, and I've done it with my own personal resources. I'm not the police. I'm not some rich person, right? I'm a person who's taken on Ben and I situations, right, with our meager resources as private lawyers, to make a difference. And at times it has made a difference.
I wanted to touch on something real quick with the assistant state attorney. One thing people may not realize, when an officer is accused or arrested or something happens with the officer, that affects you guys a lot more. Every case that officer may have been involved in is then called into question, right?
It does. It does to a certain extent. So,
because I know we had a case here in Tampa where there was an officer who was fired and he has since been rehired. But every case that you guys dealt with, 18 or so of them that had to be that. But that's another conversation, I guess. Another thing that just came to mind. I want to talk about community policing for a moment.
Can we please mute, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
If you're not talking, please mute.
Thank you. Community policing, what exactly does that mean? We hear that term a lot. And, I'm going to ask, actually, Mr. Pottson, if you could talk a little bit about what community policing is from an historic perspective, and then I want to get the police chiefs to kind of weigh in.
Sure. So a lot of community policing efforts began in the late 1960s and 1970s after the long hot summer of '67. A lot of cities across the country just sort of went into firestorms over usually issues that started with police brutality, but that were also rooted in issues of residential segregation, employment access, anti-war efforts, and so on. And there were a flurry of psychological studies that came out wondering what is the issue with Black lives and the police? Are we just doing a bad job of recruiting good police officers? Are we recruiting people who are psychologically prone to this kind of violence? Or once good people join the police force, are they being psychologically trained to act out violently? And the conclusions of those studies was that there is no conclusion, right? The types of people who end up working in law enforcement run the gamut. A lot of them are really good people with good hearts. But there's no simple answer to the question. So then police departments decided, well, we need to figure out a way to reconnect or connect for the first time with communities. We need to try community-based policing. A lot of this was funded through the Johnson administration. But while he was fighting a war on poverty, Johnson was also putting millions and then billions of dollars into militarizing the police. And this was in response to all these political pressures to people saying, look at these cities, look at these outrageous Black people. They're rioting, they're looting, they're destroying property. We need to have a police force that will control them. So this was, for me, the Democratic and Republican consensus, that we're going to be tough on crime at the same time that we're allegedly promoting a program of community policing. We ended up not funding community policing at all. We ended up actually taking money from communities and giving block grants to police departments to do with whatever they would. And oftentimes that included getting materials that would enable them to militarize their forces. So community policing failed as an initiative very early in its inception because there wasn't a willingness to invest in it. And then the second part of the question for me, and this relates to some of what the other panelists were talking about, is community policing sometimes gets down to a conversation about making sure that the individuals are good. But if we go back to my initial statements, which is policing as an institution, it's a different kind of question. We live in a society that anti-Black bias that runs rampant through it. That is also not a tendentious statement of fact. And this affects people in my position, like professors, it affects teachers, it affects news reporters, but it also affects police officers. And so we know from more recent psychological studies through implicit association tests that police officers are more likely to fire a weapon at an unarmed Black suspect than they are to fire one at an armed white suspect. We know that when it comes to employment, a Black person with a college degree can have a harder time getting a job than a white person without a college degree and a criminal record. So these kinds of biases infect society through and through. So if we have an institution like policing that is specifically important because it deals with mortality, it deals with lives, then there has to be greater scrutiny as to what it means to have a community-based police force. And if you don't live in that community and your greatest exposure to images, for example, of Black people come through media, then you are prone and primed to view Black people as threats. Whether you're a good person or not, whether you're a good cop or not, you are still primed to see them that way. And that's not just true of white police officers, it's also true of Black police officers. We saw that in the case of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. So community policing, if it doesn't start with addressing other kinds of structural issues, like why don't our police live with us? I live in East Tampa. My police officers don't live near me, but they definitely come into my neighborhood. And when they do, I feel more unsafe than when they're not there. So community policing, if we're gonna do it, it has to start. And I see Nick shaking his head, no, but Nick, you don't live this Black life. And so if you are automatically assuming that you understand this from a more objective perspective than I do, but you're not the one whose life is at risk. And if you're not willing to listen, then this is not the kind of dialogue that can be productive.
Do you think that officers, and I'll ask the chief this question specifically, Chief Holloway, do you think that officers should live in the communities that they serve? If community policing is to work in that sense?
And I'll agree with half of what the gentleman was saying there about community policing. It did fail. When it first started out, it started off in the right way. I grew up in Tampa, so community policing to me, it worked. I remember some of the white officers coming to the neighborhood, taking their gun belts off, putting it in the trunk of their car, and playing with us. That was community policing. Then along came weed and seed. We did a hell of a job of weeding everything out, but we forgot how to seed our community. So that was the next part of it, because all the money came into how do we arrest our way out of a problem. I think a lot of police chiefs, a lot of sheriffs have changed that philosophy. When you come down to saying, should an officer he or she live in the community where they work? Well, I have this panel here on this thing. How many people here live in the community where they were raised? A lot of people tend to move out of that community just because they want to live into a different community. If the officer, if he or she truly believes in the community they're working in, they're going to become a part of that community. I think the gentleman said something earlier about officers tend to shoot more at African Americans than they do whites. I've been very fortunate to work every position there is in the police department. I've been chasing a suspect with a gun in my hand, and a white officer pulled the gun out, and thank God he didn't shoot me, because he had the confidence to, because he worked in the community, that he held back and he talked to me and said, drop the gun. Someplace else, probably would have been shot. But again, it becomes a part of becoming a part of that community. And just like the gentleman was saying, he felt nervous as a police officer. He shouldn't feel that way. And it comes that way because we in law enforcement, we've done that. When you see us coming to a neighborhood, we're coming to the neighborhood to take someone to jail or to write a report. Why not change that philosophy that we're coming into your neighborhood to park our cars to talk to you? That's where it starts, just like you're starting that conversation. Because all you see, that negative part of it, that's all we're going to get out of that.
Emanuel, you wanted to jump in there?
Yes. So I heard from you, officer, not officer. I heard from both police chiefs, and the fellow from PBA. What I heard was that y'all want to have a conversation. So I want to provide you with the answers that you're asking. What is it that we need to have? First off, I would like to say that money talks, and we know that a large amount of money from our government is poured into police force on a federal and a state and a local level. So I believe the first step is fixing our budgets so that way we are funding the police less, so that way there is less militarization, there are less resources available for officers to put into weapons or a redistribution into camera footage, microphones, things of that nature. I think the second part that we need to address is how police unions, oftentimes when police brutality cases happen or police violence cases happen, oftentimes it is the unions who appoint a lawyer, it is the union to protect the police rights, and a lot of police unions have a history of being discriminatory towards Black people. A lot of police unions have the luxury of the privacy that Attorney Parks was discussing. So police have more rights to privacy, more rights to money and things like that than the Black people in the communities that they are policing. Secondly, as far as, thirdly, when we talk about community policing, we talk about how it was a failure, but it's really not, because community policing happens a lot in white, affluent suburbs. We see that with community watches. We see that with homeowners associations, where they feel less of a need to have police in their neighborhoods, surveilling their neighborhoods, because they have less crime. So how Michaela was saying crime is often based in poverty, she's right, because more affluent neighborhoods rely on community policing and people policing each other, policing your neighbors, to ensure the neighborhood is safe. Whereas in lower income communities and primarily Black communities, there is less of that community support, which is why police are more often in there. Finally, I would like to talk about, Chief Holloway, your statement on how this would not happen in Florida. Well, it has happened in Florida. This happened for years. In my experience, the first case of police brutality, because I didn't have I'm second generation American, so my family wasn't able to discuss what the American police force looks like and how American Blackness, like being a Black American, looks different than being a Black person in Jamaica. So my first experience seeing police violence was Trayvon Martin, and that took place an hour away from Tampa. In current news, I'm hearing about Tony McDade, who was shot by police in Tallahassee and still has not received justice. I hear about Devin Dunn, who I personally know through somebody on my executive board, who was shot by police after running from his house with a stab wound. And there's been no justice for that. So when we talk about this wouldn't happen here, I wouldn't let this happen. You might not, Chief. You might not, Officer Miralda, because you don't believe that you have that. And that might very well be the case. Like David said, cops aren't all automatically bad people, but it's because of the perceptions, it's because of the media, it's because of the normalization of seeing Black people as violent, where that becomes the case. Because when we talk about racial profiling, it's because of seeing that all the time. So for example, in Tampa Bay Times, they just stopped publicizing mugshots. And before that, you would consistently see Black people's mugshots just publicly available. And if you see that as all the people who are being in mugshots, what you're going to associate is Black people are more violent. Black people are more likely to be arrested. Black people are the ones committing crimes. Right. And so
let me ask Chief Daniel, because this is interesting. We talk about community policing. Really, if you think about it, USF is one large community that they have to police. When a student gets in trouble or is arrested off campus, how do you guys, Chief Daniel, handle that differently than if it were on campus, or do you?
If someone's arrested off campus and we become aware of it, we notify the administrative process, student rights and responsibilities, because student code of conduct is that you abide by laws of the state on or off campus. We don't take any type of police action other than notification, and the student goes through the administrative process, just as they would if we arrested them. Part of that process is we take care of the criminal justice side of it. At the same time, we also notify the university, and they handle them through the administrative process as well. So from a community policing standpoint, we hope that that takes the student to a different level and provides an educational component to this experience. Depending on the type of crime, it may not be a pleasant experience, and they may wind up going to central booking. But in it, we also hope that through the university, and we help them realize the error, the mistake, or what have you, change behavior and move that person to a new status in life and to recover from this experience and move forward. Back to what Emanuel was saying, defunding the police and taking equipment away and so forth. If you defund me anymore, Tampa Police Department and the Sheriff's Office will be policing this community. I lose $100,000 a year subsidizing officers to work student events so the students can hold these events on campus and have that university experience. And that's how we function. You know, yes, I would like not to lose that money, but that's $100,000 I could use towards other community programs and such that I can't. Community policing is just that. It's community, it's officers working in the community, it's establishing trust, it's breaking down the barriers, and it's teaching the community to work with the police. So when the police aren't there, they help take care of their own, and they will call and the police can come in. We can't be everywhere all the time. Community policing just helps build trust. You know, there's agencies that speak it, and you know, and I've been in my earlier years. I didn't start at this agency. I've been in other places, but community policing is like a light switch to some folks. You know, okay, today we're doing community policing, and I'm sure Chief Holloway's seen the same thing. It's like a pair of shoes. You throw them on, and now you're in something new, and it's supposed to work. It's a process.
I'm going to go to Chief Holloway because you wanted to weigh in on that.
I just want to add in one thing, and like I say, I'm not in uniform right now, and I can tell you, I've been racially profiled, I've been stopped. I know all those things you're talking about, because I know what it feels like when I'm out of that uniform, what can and cannot happen to me. So I've been there. So yeah, I'm not naive. I know things that go on out there, and I feel like the chief and the sheriff should address them, and we're going to address them through forums like this. The other part of it is, and we do this a lot. I mean, the money that we seize from our phones in our community, we give it back. Over the past 5 years I've been in St. Pete, we've given back $500,000 back to the community, back to programs like this, so we can make sure we can grow in the community. So there's a lot of police chiefs, a lot of sheriffs, they do their asset forfeiture money, and we give it back to the community, because you're right, I don't need any more equipment. I need people with knowledge out there to help us.
Nick?
Can I chime in?
Yes, please.
Great. So I just wanted to say, listen, you can read to the students. You can read up on all the studies that go on, but I can tell you real life, okay? 1992, 1993, probably you weren't even born then. Here I am, a white guy from Long Island, New York. They stuck me in the worst and most violent housing development in Lakeland, Washington Park Homes. Look it up. And it was adjacent to Lakewood Terrace, and it was adjacent to one of the most Paul A. Diggs area. And I was there every day. Here I am. There wasn't one other white person in that area. And I was in the COPS unit, COPS. And I worked there every day and had no issues. And I could tell you the COPS program worked, because I went there every day. I got to know everybody. They didn't look at me as a white guy from New York. I could talk to them. We hung out with the kids, just like the chief was saying. Took off my gun belt, went and shot hoops. Came to the apartment. We actually put an office right in one of the apartments, right there in the grounds, and it worked perfectly. And that was in the early '90s when it first started. So I have great experience with the COPS program, and it does work. And my partner was white also. So you had two of the whitest guys on the department, and he was right across the street from me. And we had no issues at all. And that's where I cut my teeth working. And then I did another 30 years at that department. So that works. Secondly, union doesn't like bad cops. And I can tell you, I've sat in many a room over my years and told a guy and a cop, male or female, this ain't the job for you. You've got to go. I do not support this, and you need to resign. No problem with that. We don't want to work with bad cops. I don't want to work with bad cops. and my partners don't want to work with them, if we recognize it, I have no problem looking in the eye of a cop and saying, this ain't the job for you. You got to go. I can tell you straight up, done it many a times. And my record will speak for that. We have terminated that. And I know the police chiefs are the same way. They work hand in hand, and you know a guy's heavy-handed, don't want to work with that person. Not going to work. Police officers, lastly, I'm going to tell you, we don't come from some special factory, come from the general population. And you can do the best background check you can on a guy. You can talk to all their friends and their family, and you can do financials on somebody, and you can hire that person. But like I've stated before, you cannot measure the person's heart or the hate in someone's heart. That officer up in Minneapolis, he had hate in his heart before he was a police officer, or he got it while he was on the job. No doubt. And they did a background check on him, but there is no device right now for the human beings to look through that person and say that that person is going to do such a disgraceful, disgusting thing to another human being. It's just not. So until we can master that and try to find a way to weed out somebody before they put on the badge and the gun, we have to do the best we can so that if we see a cop that's doing the wrong thing, we've got to say something, and we've got to police our own. Bottom line. And we have bad cops out there. I am not going to say we don't. We've got bad teachers. We've got bad garbage collectors. We have bad everything. There's bad cops out there. I've worked with them. There's no doubt about it. But it's our job to police that. And until we don't go to a special factory for this, we are picked from the general public. And I'm telling you right now, it's very difficult to find people who want to be police officers right now. Straight up. Well, with all the stuff that's going on, very difficult to find a quality person who wants to come on. Well, I'm retired now, and take on the job on what they have to balance and do now, and become a police officer. It's very difficult, and that's the problems that we're having.
I honestly think this is a conversation that could probably go on for another 2 hours. I want to thank all of you, but I want to give you a last chance to say, each of you, kind of just your thoughts. I'll pose this question to all of you, and you can all answer it in your own way. Beyond, and I do this every time I have these discussions because I think it's important to do that, beyond the rhetoric, beyond just the words and the things that we think are great to say and need to be said, what are the next steps to make effective change? And I'm going to start with Michaela.
Hello. I think that it's important. I think it's important to, I don't know, it's hard to say because there's so much that has to be done, and it's such a huge issue to tackle. But I think that it would be best to start in the communities, in our communities, because Black youth, I mean, we're terrified of the police. Like we've seen these things, we see the media, we have our own experiences, and I think it's important to move away from the idea of police officers being this menacing force that is supposed to uphold lawfulness in our communities. We really just need support and protection, and we don't feel protected.
Emanuel?
I believe the next step would, I'm having difficulty with this question because I think when we talk about next steps, we oftentimes think of what's the next step for a citizen to do? What is the next step for a non-police officer to do, or somebody who is not in enforcement or government? But I think fundamentally, this has become an issue that needs to be addressed by government and by police, because I could say, I think our community should, work more with police. I believe that we should try and talk more to police, but you can be a friendly police officer and still have racial profiling and still, in the heat of the moment, not think before you shoot. So I believe the next step is really for mayors, government officials, and every officer, every law enforcement person in here to critically look at your department and look not only at we passed 8, can't wait, but what are we doing for anti-bias training? What are we doing to prevent, when you become an enforcement officer, there becomes like a certain level of quote unquote society that you're in, like much how military are one step above citizens technically, and police officers are kind of the same way because you are enforcing the rest of citizens. So I think it's up to law enforcement to now look at how can we prevent this from happening by making sure that we also recognize our citizenship and our humanity instead of just enforcement and I have to police all these people.
David?
I have two thoughts. One of them is about investment. As I said before, where race is a political issue, and therefore it requires political redress. And as the wealthiest nation in the world, we have made certain commitments to not investing in the communities that we've exploited for centuries. And instead, we've invested in continuing that exploitation through over-policing and through mass incarceration. So I know that the tagline, defund the police, gets people up in ire and makes them think of what Michaela said before, an anarchist society. That's not what people are asking for. It's also, I think, better for police departments who often tell us, like, we are asked to do too much. Not only do we have to deal with violent crime, we also have to deal with regular civil violations, and we have to deal with mental health crises, and we have to, police officers shouldn't be asked or tasked to do all of that. And if they aren't asked to task and do all of that, we don't have to invest so much money into it, money that then gets misused for purposes that brought us to this conversation today. So I think the first thing is reinvestment and rethinking what the institution of policing is. If it has these roots in history of maintaining an order that is unequal, then we need to rethink and retool and reimagine what the institution is supposed to do. And then the second thing is we have to address the law and judicial decrees that have made it so much more difficult to prosecute police officers, that have made it difficult for people who have suffered a lack of due process to have their voices heard in court. We have cases like cases that make it difficult for people to say, look, there is discrimination. It's been practiced in the death penalty. We know that it exists. It is there. But as an individual, I can't bring suit because I can't prove that there was individual and personal bias in this particular case. Those kinds of things we have to address as well. Otherwise, as Emanuel pointed out, law enforcement does exist on a higher plane than other people in society. And if that is the fact, then while they get due process and while we wait for a decision to be made, that means that the dead body on the ground, the George Floyd, does not ever get due process.
Thank you, sir. Assistant State Attorney Coy.
That's a good question. It's a very tough question because there's so many different facets to it. But I will say this. I think we have to get to a point where we need to have more of these conversations in terms of being uncomfortable. But I think we also need to be more tolerant of one another, because I think with certain phrases, and David kind of alluded to this earlier, you have people that hear the word Black Lives Matter, and it's almost like a split line. You have those who embrace it, and then you have those who, for whatever rhyme reason, don't tolerate it. So I think we need to learn how to be more patient toward one another. I think we also need to be accepting of the fact that in order for change to happen, we have to get out of our quote unquote comfort zones. And I think the even larger picture or larger problem is the fact that we only know ourselves and we don't know what it's like on the other side. So I think there needs to be more conversations like this where we can actually get out of our comfort zones and try to get to know one another more better. Because, and even in this conversation earlier, there was a little tiff, and I think that's because we're so focused on our own perspectives and not seeing what the other person's perspectives is.
Attorney Parks.
Yes, thank you. I think that the profession could stand some diversity. And I think if we're on a college campus today, it would be advisable if we try and find ways to recruit more Americans to law enforcement at every level, from city police all the way to the FBI. And I think it's so important because ultimately the FBI and the Department of Justice is the final arbiter of maintaining law and order within the country. And I tell you, I think that we ought to encourage, diversity at every level, from city cops all the way to encouraging folks to be FBI agents and to be prosecutors at every level. It would be my suggestion, and I would pray and hope that maybe the administration at USF will hear this and can do something about it and help this cause.
Nick.
You say Nick?
Nick?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Simple, Rod. I mean, I like this. I heard this from, I think it came out of California, and they said, comply, then complain. And I think we have the cops are on edge as well as the community. And I think you see a lot where you have officers asking simple commands. Hey, can you step out of the car? No. And just constant confrontation. I think it's the simple thing. And I can tell you that I've had issues with police officers as a white guy being pulled out of a car and being in an undercover capacity. So I've been there. Comply and complain, I think, is essential. If there's an issue, listen, and then file the complaint. And don't paint law enforcement with a wide brush. 99.9% of us and the guys and gals on the street are out there for the right reasons and trying to do the right thing. And we hate it, and it kills us when we hear people say that we're in the neighborhood or we see a video where a kid sees us and he runs behind a car because he doesn't want to see, have confrontation with the police. I mean, that bothers me a lot. And I know it bothers a lot of my fellow cops. We are out there to do the right thing. It's that small percentage that gives us a bad name that really bothers us. And we are trying to get rid of them. and that's our challenge. But the rest of us are being painted with such a wide brush just to give us the chance. And there are, like I said, 99.9% of us out there are trying to do the right thing. And we want to be that hero for you when you call 911 and come and save the day for you and your family. So I think that would help tremendously.
Thank you, Chief Holloway.
I'm sorry, was that me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say first again, thank you for letting me be a part of this panel. And I would say, look, listen, and learn. I wish I could have these group of young people with me all the time that we're out there, because I learned a lot today. And we want to reimagine the police department, take some of these things off of our plate, because police officers shouldn't be responding to a non-criminal event. We should have professionals taking care of that. So we should keep having conversations like that, because I learned a lot, especially from you, Dave. I love that history, and trust me, I was taking notes. And we've got to learn that. And that's how we're going to reimagine what the police department is going to look like. And the last and most important part is if you really want reform, we need to talk to our local, state, and federal representative, because law enforcement, all we do is enforce the laws. We got to start if you want things changed, get those three bodies together and say, hey, let's take this off the books so there's no enforcement on that. So again, thank you for this. I look forward to continue to learn from groups like this, because that's the only way we're going to get better at what we do.
Chief Daniel, last but not least.
Thank you. I too want to thank you for this opportunity. It's often that university policing is overlooked in these discussions, and I think we play a very vital role in the development of young adults when they transition into a different stage of life, and can be very impactful. In closing, I think this is a two-way street. I've been in meetings recently with the NAACP, the ACLU, the sheriff, and all the chiefs of police in Hillsborough County, and we have worked on reforming policies, and we've looked at different strategies we can do. But it's disheartening when the representatives from the community come in and say, I can't go back and talk to the people in my neighborhood about this meeting because they'll throw me out of the neighborhood. To me, that says it's failed right off the bat, and you wonder why you're there. But it takes trust, it takes time. These conversations are obviously very valuable. We can hire the best, we can train them, we can put them through anti-bias training, but as Nick and Chief Holloway said, you don't know what's in their heart. And at some point it may reveal itself, and you've done the best you can. As a community, we need to work together, make it a two-way street, and find the best people to fit in these communities the best people to serve, and all of us roll up our sleeves and work together on this. Can't just be on law enforcement. Thank you again.
Listen, let me say thank you to all of you. I really, really appreciate you taking part of this discussion. Thank you for allowing me to moderate this talk. I'll tell you, it is not an easy conversation, and I don't think it needs to be, because if you don't have that hard conversation and rip the Band-Aid off, there's never going to be any real healing. So thank you guys for your honesty, your openness. Appreciate it. And thank everyone who's tuned in to watch this. I'm going to turn it over to Cecil Howard for a few final comments.
Hey, good afternoon. First and foremost, let me thank Mr. Rod Carter for what I consider to be an outstanding, phenomenal representation of the entire journalism community in his role as moderator of this forum this afternoon. I mean, I don't think we could have found a better individual anywhere. We're quite blessed to have had you here this afternoon, Ron, and I'm so thankful to call you friend, and know that we can just call you, and within less than 5 minutes, we've already determined what time, what day, what you would wear, what you would say, and the whole nine. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And to the panelists, again, I can't thank you enough for this event. Some of you I've known for 20 or 30 years. Some of you I've just met, but I can tell you, all of you, I will call friend, all of you. I'm so impressed with what you said today, and I'm so impressed with your representation here. And I'm so happy that you were able to be a part of what I consider to be an extremely prestigious panel. Thank you so very much. This panel, this entire forum is being recorded. So we will certainly play it again and again and again. And it will actually, people will also have an opportunity to even view it on our website. So it's going to be there for quite some time, because I can tell you people, there was a lot here to be learned. So let me just say this as I finally wrap up, because if you don't stop me, we'll go well beyond our allotted time here. The last question that Mr. Carter asked is where do we go from here? And all of you had some outstanding questions, outstanding responses. And I, like many of you, took a lot of good notes in terms of where, in fact, do we go from here? But let me tell you what we at the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Opportunity have planned in terms of going from here. Number one, we know this type of dialogue is important. We know that. But we also know that it has to go deeper and even deeper. And we also know that it's got to go beyond just the dialogue. We know there's got to be some action associated with it. I think somebody mentioned, I think Holloway mentioned something to that effect earlier today. There's got to be some action associated with it. So let me just tell you real quickly what we're going to do. We are starting, as soon as this forum is over, we are starting another initiative, and it's known as, the initiative itself is called Dismantling Racism. Folks, we're not going to let up on this issue of racism, particularly as it pertains to a systemic or structural format. This notion of dismantling racism will consist of small group dialogues of 10 to 12 people, and we will talk in diverse groups of individuals. So we don't want your friends here. We want you to come with somebody or by yourself and sit in a group with 10 people who you don't even know, who are quite different and diverse from you, because we want to have as many opposing arguments as possible, as many opposing points and counterpoints as possible, primarily because it's important that we discuss our various perspectives that represent what our backgrounds are, what our experiences are. And then as we get to the end of this 6-week process, this group of individuals will meet for 6 weeks, 2 hours at a time, one day a week for 2 hours at a time for a period of 6 weeks. But as we get to the end of that 6-week process, we will then start discussing and dialoguing an action item. We will discuss an item that we believe exists as a result of racism. So when we hear Dr. Pottson talk historically about aspects of structural racism and systemic racism and those things that may exist in our environment or our communities, whether it be aspects of segregation or whether it be policies, laws, structures, statutes, whatever the case may be, these groups of individuals will come together and seek out a process of dismantling that particular aspect of what will be deemed, or what is deemed by them to be, the product of racism. So we hope that you will join us for that particular set of exercises. We will have hundreds of these groups going throughout the entire academic year, beginning in September and going all the way through next summer. We will have all types of moderators. And I said, the groups will be small groups of individuals. So, and that information will be posted on our website starting on Monday. You will be able to get on our website, download the application, complete it, and get it back to us, and we will assign you to a group. It's very important to talk about where we're going from here, because people, if we don't talk about it, and if we don't come together to try to resolve those issues or those aspects that we do believe exist as a result of racism, then they're going to continue to persist. We need to be able to say we took an active role in dismantling those particular aspects. So we do ask that you join us in clearly and completely dismantling racism here at the University of South Florida and within the USF community. Again, I want to thank everybody for your involvement. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for readily agreeing to participate in this. Don't be surprised if we call you again, because we may, you always go back to the people that did a great job. So you definitely, and as a matter of fact, some of you I've called on many times in the past, that, but don't be surprised if we call you again. Again, thank you. I can't thank you enough. And I know Dr. Brown, I know Dr. Corral, and I know on behalf of the entire DIEO staff and the University of South Florida, we thank you. And we'll see you soon. Take care. I think that's it. Was that it? That was it, right?
Okay, you all can